What's going on, everybody? I hope you guys are doing well this afternoon. Please like this video if you haven't already. Sub to the channel, click the bell for notifications, become a channel member for $2 a month. Those are the best ways to help support the channel. And I think it's time we talk a little bit more extensively about one of the elephants in the room concerning the Pete Carroll news of a couple days ago. So, if you guys watch this channel or you guys pay attention to football news at all, you probably already know Pete Carroll has been hired as the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. So that is going to affect a lot of things over in Las Vegas, of course. The impact of hiring Pete Carroll as your head coach is significant. And presumably it doesn't affect the Seattle Seahawks that much, right? Like we don't get a draft pick from that because he was our head coach and we effectively fired him. I know we didn't technically fire him, but really we fired him. We're not trading him to the Raiders, so we're not getting draft picks out of it. So theoretically, it doesn't have a lot to do with us. We play the Raiders in 2026, but we're not in the division. We're not in the same conference. Them having Pete Carroll as their head coach theoretically has no effect on us, but what if there actually is a little bit of an effect here? What if Pete Carroll becoming a head coach in Las Vegas turns Las Vegas into a team that is interested in acquiring not only former, but soon to be former and even current Seattle Seahawks players? Now, most prominently, this has been associated with Russell Wilson. Everybody out there is thinking, oh, well, of course, Pete Carroll's going to go get Russell Wilson to be his quarterback for 2025. He needs a veteran. He needs someone who is at least mildly competent. Russell Wilson is a good fit for the kind of offense that Pete Carroll wants to have. Russell Wilson should be very cheap because I don't think anyone else is going to have any interest in him. So that makes sense, right? Apparently, Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson are on good terms right now. There was maybe a point where they weren't, but it seems like they're past that. So a lot of people are like, well, he could go get Russell Wilson, and I agree that's a realistic possibility here. And I also think that the Raiders now present themselves as a very logical soft landing spot for Tyler Lockett, because I don't think Tyler Lockett is going to be on the team in the next few months. I think he will be released, and a guy like a Tyler Lockett could absolutely find a home for a year in Las Vegas now. I think Pete Carroll would love to get Tyler Lockett back. So with players like that, yeah, definitely makes some sense. Oh, and by the way, while we're here, it's worth noting that Carroll is already starting to circle the wagons around Daryl Bevell, longtime Seahawks offensive coordinator, as the offensive coordinator with the Las Vegas Raiders. And I mean, that'd be a pretty good hire. Bevell was mostly good when he was here. It got stale, it got old. The shelf life, I think, expired on him, but Bevell had a lot of success here. I think Bevell did a good job, so I think he will probably do a good job for the situation that he's in, of course, right? Like you can only do so much with the talent that you have, and he probably won't have that much talent, but looks like he is going to get Bevell, so it does seem like there is an early indication that Carroll wants some of his old guys. But what about going after players that are still under contract with the Seahawks who are presumably not going to just be released, right? Lockett's going to get released in all likelihood. So it doesn't really cost the Raiders anything other than the value of his new contract to go get Tyler Lockett. But what if there ends up being a little bit of a pipeline where the Seahawks can take players that they don't want, they don't need, they don't want to pay, or they just kind of want to turn the page on and send them to the Raiders, because a lot of these guys are guys that Pete Carroll feels deep affection towards, and we get good value out of those players because Pete Carroll is the guy who's there. So let's think about this. Everyone's talking about the Russell Wilson stuff. What about Gino Smith? And look, I'm not the first guy to propose this. Everybody has at least thought about this. I think the Russell Wilson stuff is a little more prominent, but at the same time, I think that the Geno Smith thing makes a good amount of sense too and should be talked about. We know that Pete Carroll loves Gino Smith. We know that Gino Smith had technically his best years under Pete Carroll. Now, statistically at least, I mean, I think that the Geno Smith we've seen the last couple of years is probably a little bit better than the Geno Smith in 2022, but 2022 were his best box score numbers anyway, and it's also the year he made the playoffs. So it just depends on your interpretation of that, but there is every reason to believe that Pete Carroll has a deep affection for Geno Smith. So if you move off of Geno Smith this offseason, you now have a very likely candidate to be willing to trade an asset for him. And that asset could be a lot more than you're thinking that it is because Carroll likes him. So if the Seahawks don't want to pay Geno Smith, if they just don't want to give that extension, could you open up a trade with the Las Vegas Raiders for him? And then there's DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf, player coming in on the last year of his deal. There's a little bit of discomfort, I think, around the idea of extending him, but you have to extend him if you're going to keep him in all likelihood. You're obligated to make a decision on DK Metcalf. Maybe you're not enamored with where things are with him right now, but Pete Carroll, I mean, he was the head coach and director of personnel when we drafted DK Metcalf, right? I'm sure he loves DK Metcalf. He probably looks at DK Metcalf as one of his guys. And I think that if you were to call up the Raiders and say, hey, want to make a trade for DK Metcalf, you would get more value out of him than you would out of almost anybody else. Carroll would look at that, would look at the player and go, I think I can get more out of this than what the Seahawks got out of him last year. I think I can get more out of him than any other coach in the NFL could, any other offensive system could. And I know Pete Carroll's going to mostly be in control of the defense, but clearly they're giving him some power if they're hiring Daryl Bevell, right? Like Daryl Bevell, if you're hiring him as your OC, you must have gone to Pete Carroll for advice on that. So that's an intriguing one. And I would throw Riq Woolen in there as well. Carroll probably loves Woolen's potential and believes that he can get the best out of him. Woolen's best season in the NFL by far was his rookie year with Carroll. So Carroll may look at the opportunity to trade for Woolen as an opportunity to get somebody who is extremely, extremely well fit to play with him, to extremely well fit for him to get the best out of. Pete Carroll might be the greatest defensive back coach in NFL history. I don't know if he is now, but over the breadth of his career, he is as good as it gets at the defensive back position. So I'm sure the opportunity to get someone as crazy talented as Riq Woolen is going to be appealing to him. So those would be the three guys that I think are near the top of the list. I don't know about the others. Some people are saying Ken Walker. Ken Walker, I mean, it's not really a great fit for the way Pete Carroll wants to run the ball. Pete Carroll loves A gap, B gap. Ken Walker is more of a zone runner. So I don't see that personally. Some people are saying there could be a couple other players as well. Guys like some guys like Jaron Reed you can't trade anyway. He's a free agent, but if we don't bring back Jaron Reed, I could definitely see him going to Vegas to play with the Raiders under Carroll. And maybe one or two other guys that Carroll might feel some affection towards that he would want to overpay to trade for. But it's really those three guys. And you guys know, I don't want to trade Gino. I'm open to, but I don't really want to trade Metcalf unless we're just going to take a step back in 2025. And I do want to trade Woolen. But for the right price, I think anything's on the table. Like, what if you could package Geno Smith and DK Metcalf together in a trade and you get back the Raiders' number 6 overall pick and Michael Mayer? You'd have to do that, right? That's a little too good to pass up. The number 6 overall pick and Michael Mayer, a really talented tight end who's just kind of rotting on the bench because Brock Bowers is going to be a Hall of Famer in 20 years. Yeah, I think you got to hop on that. Like, I love Gino, and I do appreciate Metcalf's talents, but the number 6 overall pick, I could get a super blue chipper with that who's going to be super cheap for the next 3 to 4 years, and I would be taking a step back in 2025. I would. But for that haul, I am willing to take a step back in 2025. I don't know if this team will. This team might flip that asset to go get another quarterback, This team might flip that asset into other things that they like better. But either way, I think that asset, I think you got to punch it in. What if you could do Gino, Metcalf, and Woolen, maybe in separate trades, but you could trade those 3 assets and get the first round pick from the Raiders, maybe like a 2026 second round pick, and Michael Mayer. Again, I think you would do it. And you know me, I don't want to take a step back, or at the very least, I don't think it's very realistic that a team would take a step back after a 10-win season. But I think that if you can get the Raiders to really covet what you have to the point where they're willing to trade that much, yeah, you'd probably do it. What if you just traded DK Metcalf and you got 2 second-round picks back or something? Their second-round pick this year and next year. Yeah, I think you're not going to get much better than that. That second-round pick is almost a first-round pick. What if you could trade Gino just for their second-round pick this year, which is a top 40 pick? Yeah, I'm probably doing that. What if you could get a third-round pick for Woolen? Just Woolen? Yeah, I'm doing that. Or maybe a fourth-round pick and Michael Mayer, or something like that. There are some combinations here that are very appealing. Now, I do want to caution everybody before they get all excited here. Pete Carroll's not the general manager. Pete Carroll doesn't have final say on personnel. Spytech, the guy they just hired, should be making personnel decisions there. If the Raiders did give Pete some kind of personnel control where he has final say, then they're even a worse franchise than I thought, and I think they're a pretty bad franchise. But more than likely, Spytech is going to act as some sort of a calming presence in the discussion for any kind of a blockbuster trade, especially for a team that is as deficient as the Raiders are right now. But it's worth talking about. Let me know what you guys think. I'll see you guys later. Go Hawks.